My name is Alex, and I'm a 12-year-old student at Oakwood Elementary School. I've always been the curious type, often finding myself in the middle of adventures, whether I planned them or not. My best friend Lucas is usually right there beside me, his wit and bravery complementing my inquisitive nature. Little did we know that our biggest challenge was about to unfold during what should have been the most magical time of the year. The school hallways were buzzing with excitement as colorful decorations transformed our everyday surroundings into a winter wonderland. Tinsel sparkled from every doorway, and the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. It was the day of our annual Christmas party, and the anticipation was palpable. As I helped my classmates hang ornaments on the giant tree in the auditorium, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This year, I was one of the students chosen to assist with the party preparations. Lucas stood nearby, precariously balancing on a ladder as he strung lights across the stage. "Hey, Alex," he called out, his voice barely audible over the cheerful Christmas music blaring from the speakers. "Can you believe Santa's actually coming this year?" I grinned, remembering the excitement when our principal, Mrs. Thompson, had announced the special guest. It was a first for our school, and everyone had been talking about it for weeks. As the final touches were put in place, students began filing into the auditorium. The room quickly filled with laughter and chatter, the air electric with holiday spirit. I scanned the crowd, taking in the joy on my schoolmates' faces. Even the teachers seemed more relaxed, joining in the festive atmosphere. Suddenly, the music faded, and Mrs. Thompson stepped onto the stage. "Boys and girls," she announced, her eyes twinkling, "are you ready to welcome our special guest?" A chorus of cheers erupted, and I felt my heart race with anticipation. This was it, the moment we'd all been waiting for. Santa Claus was about to arrive at Oakwood Elementary. The auditorium doors swung open, and a booming "ho ho ho" echoed through the room. But as Santa stepped into view, my excitement quickly turned to unease. Something wasn't quite right. This Santa was tall and lean, nothing like the jolly, plump figure I'd expected. His red suit hung loosely on his frame, and the white trim looked dingy and frayed. The beard covering most of his face seemed unnaturally stiff, and his eyes— there was something cold and calculating in those eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced at Lucas, wondering if he noticed it too. His furrowed brow told me he shared my concerns. As Santa made his way through the crowd, children's laughter turned to nervous giggles. He moved with an odd, jerky gait, his gloved hands twitching at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was raspy and low, nothing like the warm, friendly tones I'd imagined. "Who wants to tell Santa what they want for Christmas?" he asked, but it sounded more like a threat than an invitation. A few brave souls approached him, but most of the younger kids shrank back, clinging to their friends or teachers. I watched as a kindergartner named Lily hesitantly stepped forward. Santa's hand shot out, gripping her arm a little too tightly as he lifted her onto his lap. Lily's eyes widened in fear, and I saw tears forming. Mrs. Thompson seemed oblivious to the growing tension, clapping her hands enthusiastically. "Isn't this wonderful, children? Santa has come all this way just for you." But it didn't feel wonderful at all. As I watched Santa's eyes dart around the room, a sense of dread settled in my stomach. This was supposed to be a day of joy and celebration, but something sinister had crept into our school, wearing a Santa suit and a fake smile. I turned to Lucas, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to keep an eye on him. Something's not right here." As the party continued, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Lucas and I kept a watchful eye on the strange Santa, who seemed to be growing more agitated by the minute. We were so focused on him that at first, we didn't notice when little Timmy, a shy second grader, slipped away from the group. It was Mrs. Roberts, Timmy's teacher, who first raised the alarm. "Has anyone seen Timmy?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry as she scanned the crowded auditorium. A quick search of the room yielded nothing. Timmy had vanished without a trace. As panic began to spread among the teachers, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Santa was nowhere to be seen either. Lucas grabbed my arm, his face pale. "Alex, you don't think?" I nodded grimly. "We need to find Timmy, and fast. I have a feeling our creepy Santa might have something to do with this." Without alerting the adults, who were now organizing a full-scale search of the school, Lucas and I slipped out of the auditorium. We had to act quickly and discreetly. Somewhere in our school, Timmy was missing, and a sinister Santa was on the loose. With hearts pounding, Lucas and I crept through the eerily quiet hallways. The cheerful Christmas music from the auditorium faded into a distant echo, replaced by the sound of our own cautious footsteps. "Where do we even start?" Lucas whispered, his eyes darting nervously from door to door. I paused, trying to think logically despite the fear clouding my mind. If I were a creepy Santa trying to hide a kid, where would I go? As if in answer, a faint scraping sound reached our ears. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the cafeteria. We exchanged a quick glance and moved silently towards the noise. The cafeteria door was ajar, and a trail of red tinsel led from it towards the back of the room. My pulse quickened as we followed the glittering path. It ended abruptly at the door to the supply closet. Lucas reached for the handle, but I held him back. "Wait," I breathed, pointing to the floor. There, barely visible, was a set of large boot prints leading away from the closet, heading towards the basement stairs. We followed the prints, our senses on high alert. The stairwell was dark, lit only by the dim glow of emergency exit signs. As we descended, the temperature dropped noticeably, and a musty smell filled the air. At the bottom of the stairs, we found another clue. A small, red Christmas ornament lay shattered on the concrete floor. Next to it was a candy cane, partially unwrapped. "Timmy loves candy canes," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling slightly. The basement stretched out before us, a maze of shadows and silence. Somewhere in its depths, we knew, was Timmy and the menacing figure who had taken him. With each step deeper into the gloom, the sense of dread grew stronger. But we couldn't turn back now. We had to find Timmy, no matter what dangers lay ahead. The basement was a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and cluttered storage rooms. Our footsteps echoed ominously as we navigated through the maze, guided only by the occasional glint of a dropped ornament or a stray piece of tinsel. As we ventured deeper, the air grew thick with dust and the musty scent of forgotten things. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by the flickering fluorescent lights overhead. Every creaking pipe and distant rumble made us jump. "Alex," Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible, "I think I heard something." We froze, straining our ears. At first, there was only silence, but then a muffled whimper. It was coming from behind a stack of old desks. Cautiously, we peered around the corner. What we saw made my heart skip a beat. Huddled together in a small clearing were not just Timmy, but 3 other children from our school. Their eyes were wide with fear, and they huddled closer together as we approached. "It's okay," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're here to help." Just then, a deep voice echoed through the basement, sending chills down my spine. Now, children. Santa's got a special surprise for all of you." The voice was coming from a room at the end of the corridor. Motioning for the children to stay quiet, Lucas and I crept closer to the partially open door. Inside, we could see the imposter Santa, his back to us, hunched over a table. Scattered around him were tools, rope, and what looked like a large sack. "You've all been very naughty," he muttered to himself, his voice dripping with malice. "But Santa knows just what to do with naughty children." Lucas and I exchanged horrified glances. We had to act fast, but what could 2 kids do against this menacing adult? As fear threatened to overwhelm me, I knew we had to come up with a plan, and quickly. My mind raced as I scanned the room for anything we could use. Suddenly, an idea struck me. I motioned for Lucas to huddle close. "We need to distract him," I whispered. "I'll create a diversion while you sneak in and grab that rope on the table. We'll try to tie him up." Lucas nodded, his face pale but determined. I took a deep breath, picked up an old textbook from a nearby shelf, and hurled it down the corridor. It landed with a resounding thud. The fake Santa's head snapped up. "Who's there?" he growled, stomping towards the door. As he stepped out, I emerged from my hiding spot. "Hey, you big fake!" I shouted, my voice surprisingly steady despite my pounding heart. "Santa doesn't kidnap kids." His eyes narrowed behind the fake beard. "You shouldn't be here, boy," he snarled, advancing towards me. I backed away slowly, leading him away from the room. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lucas slip inside. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to keep his attention on me. "What did these kids ever do to you?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "This school, these happy little brats, they all need to learn a lesson." Just then, Lucas emerged from the room, rope in hand. Before the imposter could react, Lucas flung the rope around his legs. I rushed forward, pushing with all my might. The fake Santa toppled over, crashing to the ground. In a flurry of motion, Lucas and I managed to secure his hands, although he thrashed and yelled. It was a struggle, but adrenaline gave us strength we didn't know we had. As we stepped back panting, I couldn't quite believe what we'd done. The menacing figure that had terrified us moments ago now lay bound on the floor, his Santa hat askew, revealing thinning gray hair beneath. With trembling hands, I reached down and pulled off the fake beard. A collective gasp echoed through the basement as we recognized the face beneath. "Mr. Jenkins!" Lucas exclaimed in disbelief. It was indeed Mr. Jenkins, the school's former janitor who had been fired last year for his increasingly erratic behavior. His eyes blazed with anger as he glared up at us. "You brats think you're so special," he spat. "I wanted to teach this school a lesson. Show them what happens when they toss people aside like garbage." I felt a mix of pity and revulsion as I looked at the man who had once fixed our lockers and kept our hallways clean. "But why the children?" I asked. "They never did anything to you. They're the heart of this place," he growled. I wanted to hit where it hurt most. As the gravity of what could have happened sank in, I felt a chill run down my spine. If we hadn't acted when we did. Lucas put a hand on my shoulder, his voice steady. "It's over now, Alex. We need to get the other kids and alert the teachers." I nodded, still processing the shocking revelation. Our school Santa had turned out to be our worst nightmare. With Mr. Jenkins securely tied up, Lucas and I rushed back to where we had found the other children. They were huddled together, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "It's okay now," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "The bad man can't hurt you anymore. We're going to get you out of here." Timmy, the youngest of the group, looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Is it really over?" he asked in a small voice. I nodded, offering him a comforting smile. "Yes, it's over. Let's go find the teachers." We led the children up the basement stairs, the gloomy atmosphere gradually giving way to the warmth and light of the school above. As we emerged into the hallway, we could hear the frantic voices of the search parties. "Help!" Lucas shouted. "We're over here." Within moments, we were surrounded by teachers and police officers who had been called to the school. The relief on their faces quickly turned to shock as we recounted our harrowing adventure. As the authorities rushed to apprehend Mr. Jenkins, and the rescued children were reunited with their worried parents, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The nightmare was finally over. In the days that followed, Our school slowly returned to normal, though the events of that Christmas party left an indelible mark on all of us. Mr. Jenkins was arrested, and the full story of his twisted plan came to light, sending shockwaves through our small community. Lucas and I found ourselves hailed as heroes, but the attention made us uncomfortable. We hadn't set out to be brave. We had simply done what we felt was right in a terrifying situation. One quiet afternoon, as we sat on the swings in the school playground, Lucas turned to me. "Do you think we'll ever feel completely safe again?" he asked. I pondered his question, watching other kids play nearby, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness in our hearts. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "But I think we learned something important." "What's that?" "That we're stronger than we thought. And that it's okay to question things that don't feel right, even if adults tell us everything's fine." Lucas nodded slowly. "We'll always look out for each other, and for others who might need help," he said, a determined glint in his eye. As we sat there, I realized that while our innocence might have been shaken, our resolve to stand up for what's right had only grown stronger. The world could be a scary place, but facing it together, we felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural. Growing up in a small town where ghost stories were as common as gossiping neighbors, I learned to dismiss such tales as mere fabrications of overactive imaginations. That is, until last Christmas, when my best friend Clara and I experienced something that shook the very foundation of my beliefs. My name is Alex, and I'm a 28-year-old freelance writer with a penchant for true crime stories. Clara, my childhood friend and now roommate, works as a librarian at our local public library. We've known each other since elementary school, and our friendship has weathered countless storms. Little did we know that our bond would be tested in ways we could never have imagined. It all began with an invitation. The old Blackwood Mansion, a decrepit Victorian house perched on the outskirts of our town, had long been the subject of whispered conversations and wild speculation. Rumors of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena swirled around it like mist on a cold winter's night. So when Clara and I received ornate envelopes in the mail, inviting us to a Christmas party at the infamous Blackwood estate, we were equal parts intrigued and apprehensive. "Come on, Alex," Clara said, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she waved the invitation in front of me. "This could be fun. Maybe we'll even see a ghost." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help feeling a tingle of anticipation. The invitation promised an evening of festive cheer, complete with a live band, gourmet catering, and a tour of the supposedly haunted house. Despite my skepticism, the allure of exploring the mansion and gathering material for a potential story was too strong to resist. As we stood on our porch that crisp December evening, staring at the invitation's elegant script, neither of us could have predicted the terrifying adventure that awaited us. The Blackwood Mansion loomed in my mind, its windows like dark, hollow eyes watching us from afar. Little did we know, those eyes were more than just a figment of imagination. The night of the party arrived, and Clara and I found ourselves standing before the imposing iron gates of the Blackwood Mansion. The old house loomed above us, its weathered facade barely visible in the dim light of the antique street lamps. As we approached, the gates creaked open on their own, sending a shiver down my spine. "Automated, I'm sure," I muttered, more to convince myself than Clara. We made our way up the winding path, the crunch of gravel under our feet mixing with the faint strains of music drifting from the house. The front door swung open as we reached the porch, revealing a grand foyer bustling with guests. The interior of the mansion was a striking contrast to its dilapidated exterior. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd, their light reflecting off ornate mirrors and polished wood paneling. Yet, despite the festive atmosphere, there was an undeniable sense of age and mystery that clung to the air like cobwebs. As we mingled with the other guests, I couldn't help but notice their reactions to the house. Some seemed enthralled by its Gothic charm, while others cast nervous glances at the shadows lurking in the corners. "Did you hear about the attic?" I overheard one guest whispering. "They say it's where the old owner disappeared." Clara squeezed my arm, her eyes wide with excitement. "This place is amazing, Alex. Can you feel the history?" I nodded, trying to ignore the growing unease in the pit of my stomach. Little did I know, the house was about to reveal its secrets in ways we could never have anticipated. As the evening progressed, Clara and I found ourselves wandering through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors. The party's jovial sounds faded into the background, replaced by the creaking of old floorboards beneath our feet. It was then that I first noticed something odd. The chandelier above us flickered, its light dimming for a moment before returning to full brightness. I dismissed it as faulty wiring in an old house, but Clara's grip on my arm tightened. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her eyes darting around the hallway. Before I could respond, a cold draft swept past us, carrying with it the faint scent of peppermint and... was that smoke? The temperature seemed to drop several degrees in an instant, and I felt goosebumps rising on my arms. "It's just an old house with poor insulation," I said, trying to sound convinced. But even as the words left my mouth, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As we turned a corner, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move at the end of the hallway. It was there and gone in an instant, like a dark figure darting out of sight. Clara gasped beside me, confirming that I wasn't the only one who had seen it. Probably just another guest, I reasoned, but my voice lacked its usual certainty. We exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and apprehension reflected in Clara's eyes. Despite my attempts to rationalize these events, a nagging feeling in the back of my mind whispered that we were about to uncover something beyond our understanding. Our exploration was suddenly interrupted by a sound that made us both freeze in our tracks. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed from the floor above us. The steady rhythm of heavy boots on wooden planks was unmistakable. "Did you hear that?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, my heart racing. "It's probably just another guest exploring," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. The footsteps continued, moving from one end of the ceiling to the other, then stopping abruptly. An eerie silence fell over the house, broken only by the faint sounds of the party in the distance. "We should check it out," Clara suggested, her curiosity overriding her fear. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We found the nearest staircase and began our ascent, each step creaking under our weight. The air grew colder as we climbed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As we reached the landing, the silence became oppressive. The upper floor stretched out before us, shrouded in shadows. Whatever had made those footsteps was nowhere to be seen, but the feeling of unease only intensified. Something was waiting for us, and we were about to discover what it was. With trepidation, we inched our way down the darkened hallway of the upper floor. Our footsteps, muffled by the threadbare carpet, seemed unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. At the end of the corridor, a narrow staircase led up to what I assumed was the attic. "Should we?" Clara asked, her voice a mix of excitement and fear. I nodded, my curiosity overriding my apprehension. As we ascended the creaky stairs, the air grew thick with dust and the musty scent of age. The attic door, old and weathered, opened with a groan that seemed to echo through the entire house. The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten memories. Moonlight filtered through a small, round window, casting long shadows across piles of trunks, old furniture, and countless boxes. But it was what stood in the center of the room that caught our attention and made our blood run cold. There, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight, stood an old mannequin adorned with a Santa Claus costume. The red suit was faded and moth-eaten, the white trim yellowed with age. The empty eye sockets of the mannequin's mask seemed to stare right through us. "Alex," Clara whispered, "I think this is the costume the old owner wore." As if in a trance, I stepped forward and reached out to touch the fabric. The moment my fingers made contact, an icy chill shot through my body. I jerked my hand back, gasping. "Did you feel that?" I asked, my voice shaking. Clara nodded, her eyes wide. "It's like it's alive somehow." As we stood there, staring at the costume, the attic seemed to grow colder. The shadows in the corners appeared to deepen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were no longer alone. Something had awakened in this house, something old and not entirely benevolent. And now, it knew we were here. Shaken by our discovery in the attic, Clara and I retreated to the relative safety of the main floor. The party continued around us, oblivious to the chilling encounter we'd just experienced. We found a quiet corner in the mansion's vast library, surrounded by towering bookshelves and the musty scent of old leather and paper. "We need to find out more about this place," Clara whispered, her librarian instincts kicking in. She began scanning the shelves, pulling out dusty tomes and local history books. As we pored over the volumes, a disturbing story began to emerge. The Blackwood Mansion, we learned, had been owned by a man named Edward Blackwood in the 1950s. Every Christmas, he would dress up as Santa Claus and host elaborate parties for the town's children. "Listen to this," Clara said, her finger tracing a line in an old newspaper clipping. "On Christmas Eve, 1956, Edward Blackwood disappeared without a trace. The last time he was seen, he was wearing his Santa Claus costume and heading up to the attic to retrieve more presents." A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the costume we'd just encountered. "You don't think?" Clara nodded grimly. "The costume we found could be the very one he was wearing when he vanished." As we dug deeper, we uncovered more unsettling details. There had been rumors of strange occurrences in the house even before Blackwood's disappearance. Guests reported hearing unexplained noises, seeing shadows move on their own, and feeling unexplained cold spots. "Alex," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think we might be in real danger here. If these stories are true, if Blackwood's spirit is still here." I swallowed hard, the reality of our situation sinking in. We had stumbled into something far beyond our understanding, and now we had to find a way to deal with it before it was too late. No sooner had we absorbed the chilling history of the Blackwood Mansion than the supernatural activity around us intensified. A heavy book suddenly flew off a nearby shelf, narrowly missing Clara's head. The temperature in the room plummeted, our breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. "We need to get out of here," I said, grabbing Clara's arm. But as we turned to leave, the library door slammed shut with a resounding bang. Panic rising in my chest, I watched in horror as objects began to move on their own. Pens rolled across desks, chairs scraped against the floor, and the chandelier above us swayed ominously. In the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure, tall and imposing, wearing what looked like a tattered Santa suit. Clara's grip on my arm tightened. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling, "we have to do something. We can't let this spirit continue haunting this place." I nodded, my mind racing. "We need to perform a ritual, something to cleanse the house and put Blackwood's spirit to rest." As the paranormal activity escalated around us, we realized we had no choice. We had to confront this entity head-on, or risk becoming part of the mansion's tragic history ourselves. With determination born of desperation, Clara and I set about preparing for the ritual. Drawing on her knowledge of folklore and my research skills, we cobbled together a plan. We needed salt for purification, white candles for protection, and sage for cleansing. Luckily, we found most of these items in the kitchen and various rooms of the mansion. As we gathered the materials, the house seemed to fight back. Doors slammed shut in our faces, objects hurled themselves at us, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. It was as if the very walls were trying to impede our progress. "We need to do this in the attic," Clara said, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. "That's where it all began, and that's where it needs to end." Clutching our makeshift ritual kit, we made our way back up to the attic. Each step felt like a battle against an unseen force trying to push us back. As we entered the attic, the Santa costume stood exactly where we'd left it, but now it seemed to pulse with an eerie, otherworldly energy. We formed a circle of salt around the costume and lit the candles. Clara began to recite an incantation she'd found in one of the old books, her voice growing stronger with each word. I joined in, the unfamiliar Latin phrases feeling strange on my tongue. As we chanted, the supernatural activity intensified. The costume began to twitch and move as if inhabited by an invisible form. Wind whipped around us, threatening to extinguish our candles. The very foundations of the house seemed to shake. Through it all, we continued our ritual, our voices rising above the cacophony of paranormal activity. Just as I thought we couldn't endure any more, a bone-chilling scream echoed through the attic. The costume rose into the air, suspended by invisible forces, and I knew we had reached the moment of truth. The attic erupted into chaos as we reached the climax of our ritual. The floating Santa costume contorted and twisted in midair, as if struggling against an invisible force. The air crackled with energy, and I could feel the hair on my arms standing on end. "Keep going," I shouted to Clara over the deafening noise of wind and creaking timbers. Our voices, hoarse from chanting, somehow found new strength as we pushed through the final verses of the incantation. Suddenly, a ghostly figure materialized within the costume, the spirit of Edward Blackwood. His face was a mask of anguish and rage, his spectral form flickering like a faulty light bulb. He lunged towards us, his ethereal hands clawing at the air. "You don't belong here," the spirit howled, its voice a horrifying mix of despair and anger. Clara and I stood our ground, hands clasped tightly as we continued our chant. The salt circle around us glowed with an otherworldly light, keeping the enraged spirit at bay. Objects flew around the attic in a whirlwind of supernatural energy. I felt my resolve wavering as a heavy book grazed my shoulder, but Clara's grip tightened, anchoring me to the moment. "Almost there," she whispered between verses, her eyes never leaving the writhing spirit before us. The air grew thick with tension as we neared the end of the ritual. Blackwood's spirit made one last, desperate lunge at us, his face contorted in a silent scream. In that moment, I knew that everything hinged on our next words. We were on the precipice of either salvation or damnation. With a final, powerful incantation, Clara and I completed the ritual. A blinding flash of light erupted from the center of our salt circle, enveloping Blackwood's spirit. The chaos in the attic reached a fever pitch, then suddenly, silence. As our vision cleared, we saw the Santa costume lying crumpled on the floor, lifeless once more. The oppressive atmosphere that had permeated the house lifted, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt since we'd arrived. "Is it over?" I whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "I think we did it, Alex. We actually did it." As if on cue, we heard a commotion from downstairs. The other party guests had finally noticed the supernatural events. Confused voices and hurried footsteps echoed through the house. We looked at each other, exhausted but triumphant. Without a word, we knew it was time to leave. We had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, but the experience had left us drained and forever changed. As we made our way down the attic stairs, I cast one last glance at the Santa costume. It lay still, just an old piece of fabric once more, its secrets finally laid to rest. In the days that followed our harrowing experience at the Blackwood mansion, Clara and I found ourselves grappling with the reality of what we had encountered. The world seemed different now, as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a dimension we had previously been blind to. We spent countless hours discussing that night, piecing together the events and trying to make sense of it all. The local news buzzed with stories of the Christmas party gone wrong, but none came close to capturing the true nature of what had transpired. "Do you think we should tell anyone?" Clara asked one evening as we sat in our apartment, mugs of hot cocoa warming our hands. I shook my head. Who would believe us? We'd be laughed out of town. The experience had changed us both. I found myself approaching my writing with a new perspective, delving deeper into the mysteries of the world with an open mind. Clara's work at the library took on new meaning as she quietly began to collect and preserve local legends and ghost stories. We never returned to the Blackwood mansion, but its presence lingered in our lives like a shadow. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I could swear I heard the faint echo of footsteps or caught a whiff of peppermint and smoke. The haunted house had left its mark on us, a reminder that there are things in this world beyond our understanding. As I sit here, recounting our tale, I can't help but wonder, what other secrets are out there, waiting to be uncovered by those brave or foolish enough to look? My name is Lucas, and I've always been a bit of an introvert. Growing up in Sao Paulo, I found solace in books and video games rather than bustling parties. That was until I met João in college. He became my best friend, always pushing me out of my comfort zone. It was João who convinced me to attend the now infamous Christmas party that would change our lives forever. As we approached the warmly lit house, snowflakes danced in the chilly December air. João's excitement was contagious, and I found myself smiling despite my usual reservations about social gatherings. "Come on, Lucas. It's going to be amazing," João said, practically dragging me up the steps. The moment we stepped inside, the festive atmosphere enveloped us. The living room was a winter wonderland, with twinkling lights, garlands, and a massive Christmas tree that nearly touched the ceiling. The air was thick with the scent of cinnamon and pine, and laughter echoed from every corner. Our host, Maria, greeted us with warm hugs and steaming mugs of mulled wine. As we mingled with the other guests, I started to relax, the alcohol warming my cheeks and loosening my tongue. That's when I first noticed him, a jolly Santa Claus seated by the fireplace, his belly shaking with laughter as he handed out presents to the partygoers. There was something oddly captivating about him, his eyes twinkling with an almost otherworldly light. "João, look," I whispered, nudging my friend. "Santa's here." João's eyes widened with childlike wonder. "Let's go get our gifts." As we approached Santa, a shiver ran down my spine despite the room's warmth. He turned to us, his smile widening beneath his snowy beard. "Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, boys," he boomed, reaching into his sack. "I have something special for you too." With trembling hands, João and I accepted our presents, unaware that we were about to unwrap a nightmare. João and I retreated to a quiet corner of the room, eager to open our gifts. The cheerful chatter of the party faded into the background as we focused on the beautifully wrapped packages in our hands. "You first," I said, nudging João. He didn't need any more encouragement. With childlike glee, João tore into the wrapping paper. His expression of excitement quickly morphed into one of confusion as he revealed what was inside. "It's me," João muttered, holding up a doll that was an eerily perfect miniature version of himself. I leaned in for a closer look, my heart rate quickening. The doll was uncanny, from João's unruly curly hair down to the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident. Even the clothes were a perfect replica of what he was wearing that night. With shaking hands, I unwrapped my own gift. As the paper fell away, I found myself staring into the lifeless eyes of my own doppelganger. The doll was me in every detail. My short brown hair, the mole on my left cheek, even the nervous habit I had of biting my lower lip was captured in the doll's expression. "This is weird," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How did Santa know what we look like?" João laughed nervously. "Maybe Maria told him? It's kind of cool though, right?" I nodded, not wanting to admit the growing sense of unease in the pit of my stomach. As we examined our dolls more closely, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The dolls' eyes seemed to follow our movements, and their smiles looked less friendly and more sinister. Suddenly, I saw it, a slight twitch of my doll's finger. I blinked hard, convinced I was imagining things. But then it happened again. "Joao," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I think my doll just moved." Joao's eyes widened as he looked at my doll, then quickly darted back to his own. "No way," he breathed. "That's impossible." But as we watched in horror, the impossible became undeniable. My doll's head slowly turned, its glassy eyes locking onto mine. Joao's doll followed suit, its tiny hand reaching out towards him. The festive atmosphere of the party suddenly felt distant and surreal. The cheerful Christmas music turned discordant in my ears, and the warm glow of the lights seemed to flicker ominously. "We need to get rid of these," I said, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. As if sensing our intentions, the doll's movements became more pronounced. My doll's lips parted in a grotesque smile, revealing tiny, sharp teeth. Joao's doll stood up in his hands, its limbs moving with unnatural fluidity. "Ho ho ho," Joao's doll said in a perfect imitation of his voice, but with a chilling undertone that made my blood run cold. Panic seized us. We dropped the dolls, but they landed on their feet, their eyes never leaving our faces. The party around us continued, oblivious to our growing terror. "Hey guys, enjoying your gifts?" Maria's voice made us jump. As she approached, the dolls instantly became motionless. "Maria," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "These dolls, there's something wrong with them." She looked at the dolls on the floor, confusion crossing her face. "They look perfectly normal to me. Are you two okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." As Maria spoke, I saw my doll's hand twitch slightly, reaching for my shoe. Joao saw it too, his face paling. "We need to talk," Joao said urgently. "Somewhere private." Maria led us to a quiet study, away from the party's bustling noise. As soon as the door closed behind us, words tumbled out of our mouths, describing the terrifying movements and sounds we'd witnessed. "Slow down," Maria said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Start from the beginning." We recounted our experience, our voices trembling. As we spoke, Maria's expression changed from skepticism to worry. "The Santa," she muttered, more to herself than to us. "I don't remember inviting a Santa." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "He wasn't part of the party." Maria shook her head, her face pale. "I need to make a call," she said, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. While Maria stepped aside, Joao and I exchanged worried glances. The room felt colder, and shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my vision. "Lucas," Joao whispered, "what if we're not the only ones? What if others got dolls too?" Before I could respond, Maria returned, her face grim. "My grandmother, she told me a story once. About cursed dolls and a malevolent spirit that takes the form of Santa Claus. I always thought it was just a scary bedtime story, but now what?" I prompted, dreading the answer. "Now I think we might be dealing with something far more dangerous than we imagined," Maria said. "The spirit, it's said to replace people with dolls, stealing their souls in the process." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Joao's hand found mine, squeezing it tightly. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Maria's eyes hardened with determination. "We fight back. But first, we need to warn the others and find out who else received a doll. We're stronger together." As we prepared to rejoin the party, a sense of dread settled over me. Our night of festive cheer had turned into a battle for survival. We rushed back to the main room, our eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of distress. The party continued in full swing, oblivious to the horror unfolding in our midst. "There." Joao pointed to a corner where a young woman was staring at a doll in her hands, her face a mask of terror. We approached her quickly. As we got closer, I saw her doll's head swivel towards us, its tiny mouth opening in a silent scream. "Put it down!" I yelled, startling nearby partygoers. The woman dropped the doll, which landed with an ominous thud. Before anyone could react, Joao stomped on it hard. Instead of breaking, the doll let out an inhuman shriek that cut through the music, silencing the room. Chaos erupted. More people realized their gifts were alive, screaming and throwing their dolls away. The dolls, now fully animated, began to attack. My own doll appeared out of nowhere, latching onto my leg with surprising strength. I kicked frantically, trying to dislodge it. Joao was grappling with his doll, which had somehow grown to the size of a toddler. "The fireplace!" Maria shouted over the pandemonium. "Throw them in the fire!" I managed to grab my doll and hurl it into the flames. Instead of burning, it writhed and screeched, its plastic skin bubbling but not melting. Joao finally overpowered his doll and tossed it in as well. The fire roared unnaturally, turning an eerie green as it consumed the dolls. But our victory was short-lived. More dolls emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. We were outnumbered and running out of options. "This isn't working," I gasped, backing away from the advancing dolls. "We need another plan." Joao grabbed my arm, his eyes wild with fear. "Lucas, look." I followed his gaze to see the Santa Claus, standing by the Christmas tree, his jolly demeanor replaced by a sinister grin. As our eyes met, I knew we were facing something far more powerful than we had imagined. As the chaos intensified around us, Maria grabbed our arms and pulled us towards the attic stairs. "Quick, up here!" she shouted over the cacophony of screams and shattering objects. We scrambled up the narrow staircase, slamming the door behind us. The attic was dimly lit and filled with dusty old furniture and boxes. Maria hurriedly rummaged through an ancient trunk. "My grandmother left me something," she explained breathlessly. "She said it was for emergencies only. I think this qualifies." As Maria searched, a chilling voice echoed from below. "You can't hide from me, children. I've been doing this for centuries." Joao's face paled. "What does he mean?" Maria pulled out a worn leather-bound book. "This spirit," she began, flipping through the pages, "it's ancient. It feeds on the joy and innocence of Christmas, twisting it into something dark." "But why the dolls?" I asked, my voice shaking. "They're vessels," Maria explained, her eyes scanning the text. "The spirit replaces people with these dolls, trapping their souls and feeding off their life force." A loud thump from the door made us all jump. The malevolent Santa was trying to break in. "There's a ritual," Maria said urgently. "We can banish the spirit, but it requires a sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Joao asked, his voice barely a whisper. Before Maria could answer, a scream from downstairs caught our attention. We rushed to the small attic window and saw one of the party guests outside, running towards their car. Suddenly, their body began to contort and shrink, their skin taking on a plastic sheen. "Oh God," I gasped. "They're turning into dolls." The door shuddered again, wood splintering under the assault. Maria's face was grim as she turned to us. "The sacrifice, it's memories. Happy Christmas memories. To banish the spirit, we have to give up the very joy it feeds on." Joao and I exchanged glances, the weight of the decision heavy in the air. Were we willing to lose our cherished holiday memories to save everyone? The door gave one final groan before bursting open, revealing the twisted form of Santa, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Time's up, children," he growled. "Let's play." The attic erupted into chaos as the malevolent Santa lunged towards us. Joao and I dove in opposite directions, while Maria clutched the book to her chest and began chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy as Maria's words echoed through the room. Santa's attention snapped to her, his jolly facade melting away to reveal a grotesque, shadowy form. "You think you can banish me?" he snarled, his voice no longer jovial but a guttural growl. "I've consumed countless souls over the centuries." I scrambled to my feet, searching for anything we could use as a weapon. My hand closed around an old candlestick just as a horde of dolls began pouring through the open door, their plastic limbs clicking ominously against the wooden floor. João positioned himself between Maria and the advancing dolls, swinging a broken chair leg to keep them at bay. "Whatever you're doing, Maria, do it faster," he shouted. The spirit lunged at Maria, but I intercepted, swinging the candlestick with all my might. It passed through the shadowy form, but the spirit recoiled nonetheless. "Lucas." Maria called out, her voice strained. "Think of your happiest Christmas memories. Focus on them." Closing my eyes, I conjured up images of childhood Christmases. The warmth of family, the excitement of opening presents, the joy of shared meals. I could feel the memories slipping away, becoming hazy and indistinct. João let out a pained gasp beside me, and I knew he was experiencing the same loss. The spirit howled in rage, sensing what we were doing. "No. Those memories are mine," it screeched, lashing out with tendrils of darkness. Pain seared through my body as one tendril struck me, sending me crashing into a stack of boxes. Through blurring vision, I saw João fall to his knees, blood trickling from his nose. Maria's chanting reached a fever pitch, her words seeming to physically push back the encroaching darkness. The spirit writhed and contorted, its form fluctuating wildly. As my consciousness began to fade, I reached out and grasped João's hand. Together, we poured every last ounce of our Christmas joy into Maria's ritual, praying it would be enough. A blinding light erupted from Maria's book, engulfing the attic in a dazzling display of white and gold. The malevolent spirit's agonized scream pierced the air as it was torn apart, dissipating into nothingness. The dolls crumbled to dust, leaving behind confused and disoriented party guests in their wake. As the light faded, I found myself on the floor, my head throbbing and my memories fuzzy. João lay beside me, slowly stirring. Maria slumped against the wall, the now smoking book clutched to her chest. Is it over?" João croaked, his voice barely audible. Maria nodded weakly. "It's done. The spirit is banished." Slowly, we made our way downstairs. The house was a mess, but everyone was safe. As we explained what had happened, I realized the weight of our sacrifice. The joy of past Christmases felt distant, like trying to recall a dream upon waking. In the days that followed, we helped each other cope with our lost memories. Though the holiday season would never be quite the same, we found solace in the knowledge that we had saved countless lives. As João and I stood outside Maria's house, watching the first snowfall of the new year, I turned to my friend. "Next Christmas," I said with a wry smile, "let's just stay home and watch movies." João laughed, nodding in agreement. "And no gifts from strangers, ever again." As we walked away, I felt a glimmer of hope. We may have lost our old Christmas memories, but we had the chance to create new ones. Ones filled with the unbreakable bond of friendship forged in the face of unimaginable horror. We've reached the end. If you liked it and can help the channel that is just starting, please subscribe. This will help a lot. Thank you all.